question, what happens to our brains when we die?
What happens when we die? It's a question that humanity has wrestled with throughout history.
It's the first ever recording of a dying human brain,
documented at the exact moment of his passing.
But a new study conducted by NYU may have found some answers.
There may now be clinical proof that our life does flash before our eyes when we die. Replay of life. New brain scans of a dying man shows what's possible after we die.
reliving our most memorable moments in the span of seconds.
The discovery was actually accidental, but it has now opened the eyes of doctors.
Dr. Ajmal Zamar was monitoring a patient for seizures using electrodes placed all across the skull when the unexpected happened. As the University of Louisville neurosurgeons studied the rare recording, a rather beautiful story unfolded.
There's very specific brainwave patterns that are happening in the brain while we have a recall or replay of memories.
The revelatory research suggests that near the time of death, rhythmic brainwave patterns may generate memory recall of important life moments. The study's co-author, neuroscientist Dr. Ajmal Zamar, says that these findings challenge our understanding of when exactly life ends.
Brain activity recordings have shown active gamma waves as a person looks at pictures of memorable life events, a wedding, the birth of a child. The same waves appeared in abundance in the dying patient and for 30 seconds after death.
And we attached what we call an EEG, an electroencephalogram. During this, the patient had cardiac arrest and died. That was what led us to the first ever recording of a dying human brain.
When scientists recorded the brainwaves of a dying man, he appeared to go through a sudden flash of memories seconds before and after his heart stopped beating.
The patient's brainwaves are similar to what's seen in people when they're dreaming, recalling memory flashbacks.
Memory flashbacks, memory recalls.
The finding has sparked both scientific and spiritual debate,
Suggesting we may experience a flood of memories when we die.
Memory flashbacks, all the things that are consistently being described by people who undergo near-death experience, these brain waves that exactly the same ones we're measuring when we record the activity of this patient 30 seconds before the heart stops beating and 30 seconds after the heart stops beating. That we found was quite astonishing.
The heart stopped, but the sensors still in place picked up the patient's final brain waves.
This is not all that unusual. We capture those EEGs on a regular basis.
What do scientists say? Ever since the technology was available, scientists have been studying the moment of death for clues to what happens to people. Using EEG or electroencephalogram technology to track the activity in the brain, they discovered that brain activity actually flares at the moment of death. When researchers tested the brain activity of rats that were euthanized, they discovered that the animal's consciousness was even more alert and intense than the normal waking state. Within 30 seconds of an induced cardiac arrest, the brain goes into overdrive. It implies something shocking. The brain doesn't die when the body does. Doctors at a Canadian intensive care unit discovered something disturbing after life support was turned off for 4 patients and they were declared dead. One of the patients' EEG continued to show brain activity for up to 10 minutes. There was no pulse and the pupils didn't retract when tested with light, but the patient's brain activity resembled the same frequency as deep sleep.
So this particular study is the largest study ever carried out in the world. It was done in 15 medical centers across the US and in Europe. And we studied more than 2,000 people who'd gone through this cardiac arrest or process of death. And we did not expect people to have any consciousness or awareness. But intriguingly, up to 40% of people came back and had a perception of being aware of what was happening to them, even though they had technically gone beyond the threshold of death.
For about a minute, 30 seconds before his heart stopped, and for 30 seconds after, the brain scans were very, very similar to what they're like during memory recall, meditation, and dreaming.
I should also add that among that group, 10% had a very deep, profound, mystical experience that was very true to them. But interestingly, 2% actually had full awareness, could describe all the events that were going on that were validated.
Many people have observed that those dying, even those in palliative care as they expire from terrible illness, have a peaceful or even euphoric expression on their face in their last hours. A study of rats at the moment of death indicated that the levels of serotonin in the blood tripled in their last minutes. Serotonin is a chemical believed to contribute to feelings of happiness and is matched by the powerful endorphins which have the same effect. If one of the body's last functions as it shuts down is to release these chemicals, it's likely that they take away the pain and the fear of death and allow the person to pass peacefully, enjoying a natural high that takes the edge off those last moments. The brain is a complex and durable organ, and it may have the ability to outlive the body.
This was the first complete finding so far, and it has indicated that people were in fact remembering things just before they died.
People who have these very deep, profound, mystical experiences, often they describe a sensation of being very peaceful, seeing a bright, warm, welcoming light, sometimes deceased relatives. And intriguingly, some of them describe a sensation of a being that they describe as being perfect and full of light and love and compassion. Those who have that experience are often very positively transformed for the rest of their lives. It's very profound, It's real to them. They become less afraid of death. They lose their fear of death completely. They engage in altruism. They're more helpful to people. They engage more with family. It completely changes them. So there's something very profound about this experience that they have.
We often hear people say, I saw the light, some sort of light. Why do you think it is that some people see that and some people don't?
Well, so There are two possibilities. One is that, as you said, only some people see it, and we think that it might be 10%. But the alternative is that everyone sees it. But unfortunately, because of the medical treatments that they get afterwards in the intensive care unit by doctors such as myself to save their brain, they forget it. And one of our new studies is trying to actually decipher whether people have had it but just forgotten about it. And so I think there is some evidence that more people are having it, but unfortunately they just forget it afterwards.
Basically, the 40 Hz gamma waves are associated with our consciousness.
So of course the question is, why does that happen? And we don't have the answers, because to our scientific model, when people have died, there should be no more conscious awareness going on. But it sounds like maybe consciousness is able to continue. And by that, I don't mean that they're awake, but that entity that makes us who we are, makes Sam who he is, makes Rena who she is, the self, the mind, seems to continue and doesn't become annihilated after a person has gone through their process of death.
Through generating oscillations involved in memory retrieval, the brain may be playing a last recall of important life events just before we die. He further added, just before and after the heart stopped working, we saw changes in a specific band of neural oscillations. The study said that it is possible that during death, the brain organizes and executes a biological response that could be conserved across a species.
Just before we die, and we experience the most memorable experiences of our life flashing in the span of seconds through our head just before we go.
Dr. Zemmor says the study was done in 2016, but he waited years to publish his work, reaching out to colleagues and hoping to find more case studies. That's when he realized just how rare it was to actually capture this type of brain recording.
It seems to find out the truth of what happens to the brain at the moment of death, there's only one way to find out, but those who know aren't telling tales.
There could be some truth to that old saying, I saw my life flash before my eyes.